I hope you're doing well on this Veterans Day. And to all of you veterans, we so much appreciate your service to our country. So Turning Point USA, y'all know, obviously, Charlie Kirk and all that. One of the things that I thought is fascinating, my 5 o'clock hour had everything to do with Donald Trump and his, it's the best way to put this, Donald Trump and his, some people say gaslighting to MAGA voters because of this interview with Laura Ingraham, where the president said, essentially, and I'm going to paraphrase, we'll cover this a little bit later on if you're just joining us, but the president said, the economy's doing great. The higher prices that people are experiencing essentially is a figment of people's imaginations. You're falling for, the Democrats and the mainstream media trying to dupe you into thinking that prices are higher. Now, I went through some of the facts and the figures and prices and everything. And so I've said my piece on that. The president, I think that he's being a little disingenuous, or he just doesn't know. But moving forward from there, you have to put everything into its proper perspective. Because, number one, Joe Biden had a far, far worse economy. So that's number one. And number two, okay, so let's say you're not happy with Donald Trump. Totally get that. If you're an independent and you are, or you're a conservative, a Republican, whatever, I want you to think about the alternative. I want you to think about everything that we as conservatives went through, not only during the reign of Joe Biden, but also what is going on right now. Turning Point USA, I think we're, 6, maybe 7 weeks from the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Is that what it is, I think? So, a couple of months after the assassination of Charlie Kirk, and Turning Point USA was in Northern California, UC Berkeley, and the left did what the left does. Go the fuck home! That is, again, at Berkeley, you have all of these protesters trying to block people from getting in or getting out. And so you've got all of these, all of these people that are just chanting, Nazis go home and all of that other nonsense. And so you look at what's going on at these Turning Point USA events, and as angry as you may be, because there's a lot of people, a lot of MAGA folks that are angry with this interview between Laura Ingraham and Donald Trump, because he did say some things that I would say were, not exactly consistent with being America first. We'll talk about that. But I do, again, want you to put it in context, because this kind of thing, what happened at Turning Point USA, where 4 people were arrested, that's what the left stands for. That is still what the left stands for. And by the way, now they're even more super duper charged, I would say, because of what happened in New York with Mamdani, and also in New Jersey and the other Virginia, the other elections that were held last week. And so, again, put everything in its proper perspective. 4 arrested at UC Berkeley, a Turning Point USA event. The visit is the nonprofit organization's first to a California college campus since the killing of Charlie Kirk. And they don't care. The left simply does not care. And so people, when I woke up this morning, I had a lot of people that had sent me, clips of President Trump and the interview with Laura Ingraham and just, talking about, discussing, venting their frustration and their anger. I get it. I'm right there with you. I think I got maybe 15 or so. But I'm able to put it in its proper context, because the Democrats are still the same party that had, number one, wide open borders and lied about it, 9.1% inflation, and they were trying to convince us that inflation was a good thing. And they're talking about, clearly they are supercharged after the elections last week, and they are still the same party that celebrated the death of Charlie Kirk. So I'm not getting all angry about Donald Trump's interview with Laura Ingraham, because I'm able to put it in its proper context. Now, being a conservative, part of what being a conservative is all about is, okay, let's be truthful. Let's be honest about what's happening. And I think that is part of what Donald Trump was missing last night during this interview with Laura Ingraham. Now, one of the things I want to talk about just real quickly is the 50-year mortgages. Because I'm just going to, and I've told you before, and I'm going to tell you again, just very briefly, my daughter trying to move to Middle Tennessee, there's no place where she can afford. But if you offered her a 50-year mortgage, she might be able to afford it. But here's the thing. From a financial standpoint, do you think that's a good idea, a 50-year mortgage? See, I don't believe that a 50-year mortgage is a viable option for someone, although you could very easily talk about, okay, so if somebody gets a 50-year mortgage, and Trump talked about this, if somebody gets a 50-year mortgage, then that interest rate, I should say the monthly payment is going to be lower, because you're spreading a loan out over 50 years. But here's the thing. A lot of people are saying a 50-year mortgage is a sellout to the banks because you're paying a huge amount of interest. Now, the other side of that is, okay, so let's say that you get a 50-year mortgage. And so you are going to be able to afford it because you're spreading the payments out over 50 years. All right, I get that. But you're paying a lot more. Number one, you're paying a lot more in interest rates. That's number one. And number two, you can say, well, you could just refinance. Well, the sad truth of the matter is that you can try to refinance, but oftentimes some of these, banks and lending places, they are going to have a problem with refinancing a mortgage that is over, 40 years. And so that is going to be credit unions, is what I was trying to say, credit unions. So that's a big problem. And so President Trump, somebody told him, yeah, you know what? A 50-year mortgage is the way to go. I don't know. Here's what he said. He was asked about this during Laura Ingraham's show last night.
To the question, though, because your housing director has proposed something that has enraged your MAGA friends, which is this 50-year mortgage idea. So a significant MAGA backlash, calling it a giveaway to the banks and simply prolonging the time it would take for Americans to own a home outright. Is that really a good idea?
I think, and I'm going to just say this, I'm going to let Trump speak after this. I'm going to play the audio after this. But the question is, ultimately, how realistic is it for someone to, number one, pay off a 50-year loan? But let's also be honest. Most people don't stay in their homes 30 years, 40 years, or 50 years. So you get the loan, and then if you can refinance the loan. Remember we used to have like balloon payments and all that kind of stuff? And so you get the 50-year loan. Then, again, the idea is that you can refinance into a 30 when you are in a better financial situation. But you're also going to have a lot less equity in your home because you're paying a lot more in interest rates. And so one of the things that people are saying is, and especially young people who are the ones oftentimes that can't afford a home, is this isn't really a solution to the problem. Laura Ingraham asked Donald Trump the question, okay, so 50-year mortgages, huge backlash, she says, from MAGA. Was it really huge? I don't know if that was huge backlash from MAGA. I think a lot of people said, well, if this is your idea of a solution, it's not much of a solution. My response is, well, nobody is forcing you into a 50-year loan. So nobody is forcing you to do this. This would be something that would be an option. Is it a viable option? A lot of people say no. Some people say yes. This is what Donald Trump said on Laura Ingraham.
It's not even a big deal. I mean, you go from 40 to 50 years, and what it means is you pay something less from 30. That some people had a 40, and then now they have a 50. All it means is you pay less per month. You pay it over a longer period of time. It's not like a big factor. It might help a little bit. But the problem was that Biden did this. He increased the interest rates. And I have a lousy Fed person who's going to be gone in a few months, fortunately. I have a guy too late. Jerome Powell, we call him too late. He was too late in everything.
All right. So that is what, and a lot of that we've heard, very familiar.
There's one thing that I don't know if you've mentioned this or not, but you can pay down your mortgage as long as there's no prepayment penalty. You can pay down your mortgage. So instead of paying, if your mortgage is $1,000 a month, right, you pay $1,200 a month, and you can shorten the length of the mortgage that way.
Right.
and sometimes people can afford to, get a 15-year mortgage, but they'll get the 30-year mortgage so that their payments are lower and they can do it on their own.
So you're
Happens
okay with the 50? So you're okay with the 50-year loans? And I'm not attacking.
I'm not a fan at all.
Yeah.
Not even because very few people will do what I just said.
Yeah.
But you have the option. To have the option is nice. The problem is you'll forever be tied to that loan.
The problem is that you are paying more in interest rates, and so it's going to cost more. You're right, Joan, about paying down that mortgage.
Also,
but you're going to be paying a lot more interest rates on that loan, and so you're paying down that principal. It's going to take it longer to pay down that principal.
Also,
Yep.
You'll need mortgage insurance. So there's a loan to value. So if you've got a 30-year mortgage and you need a loan to value of 80% of that loan, the value of the home being already paid off. 20% already having been paid, and then you can drop your mortgage insurance. Well, in the case of a 50-year mortgage, if it's the same standard, 80-20, to pay 20% of that loan will take a lot longer. So you're carrying mortgage insurance for a lot longer period of time. It's costly.
Yeah, it is very costly. It is an option, but when President Trump said it's not a big deal, I remember something, and I forget the exact number, but years ago, the age of the first-time home buyer was like late 20s.
Yeah.
These days, the age of the first-time home buyer is 40 years old.
40 years old. Is that crazy?
That is insanity. How old were you when you bought your first home, Joan? I was 26. I think I was 26.
I think I was 28.
Yeah, 26, 27 years old. And so there is a problem. I'm just telling you, there is a problem. And how that problem is fixed, I think part of the issue, do you know what I think part of the issue is? Is that, and I think we've talked about this before, is that younger Americans, and I'm not throwing younger Americans under the bus, but oftentimes younger Americans want a house like the house that they grew up in, which is like their parents' house, as opposed to understanding that you're going to you need what's known as a starter home, which is a smaller home, maybe a fixer-upper and so forth. And so there is that aspect to it as well. But I think, I don't know, folks on the super text line, just give me a yes or no. Where are you at on the 50-year loans? Do you think this is a viable option? Sam worked out something with Grok. Sam, what did you do?
So the average age for first-time home buyer has hit the record high of 40, while the median age for all home buyers is 56. And then I asked Grok, well, what would the interest comparison be, 30-year versus 50-year? Average price in Tennessee for a home is $315,000, so I went with that number. So there's a 0.5 percentage difference on the interest rate. The 30-year term is going to get 6.13%. The 50 would get 6.63%. So there's a $200 difference in the monthly payment. The 30 years can be $1,900. The 50 year be $1,700. Here's where it gets crazy. The interest paid on a $315,000 home on the 30-year mortgage would be $375,000. On the 50-year mortgage would be $1,250,000.
Yeah.
$740.
And that's why people say that it's a giveaway to the banks.
It is. You end up paying a total of $710,000 extra on top of what the home is worth.
Right. That's exactly right. Now again, you can buy the loan, or you can buy a home at a 50-year mortgage, and then you can try to refi. But the question is, will you be able to get refinanced with a home that has that long of a mortgage to it? I've heard from some people that say no, they wouldn't allow that. That's number one. Number two is that, okay, so then what happens if the real estate market completely goes upside down? You can't sell the house, you can't refinance, then you are screwed.
If it's a difference of $200 a month, just pick up the extra part-time job.
All right, it is 6:21 on Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7. Sally says 2 words, hell no. No.
Yeah.
No. Most people, the fees, think about the fees. So, yeah, most people are saying no to a 50-year mortgage. I would agree with that. I would rather rent than put myself in that kind of a situation. But some people, if they're desperate enough to own a home, can I just say this too, by the way? There's no shame in not owning a home. Like, there are people that I know that have owned a home for years, and then they sell it, and it's like, oh, look, something's broken. I don't have to pay for it. You know what I mean? So there's people that have never owned homes, and they're just fine. There are some people that have owned homes for a long time, and now they rent, and they're happy as can be. So, but I do understand owning a home is a great way to build wealth. I mean, I'm telling you right now, that is a great way to build wealth. Unfortunately, other times it's a great way to destroy your credit. Matthew Hurtt is joining us on the Newsmaker Hotline. Matthew, how are you today? No Zoom link. It's your day off, so you didn't want to put on pants or what?
No Zoom link today. It's Veterans Day, so staying home to remember all those men and women who've served in uniform across the country. Many of whom are friends. You know, I'm about the age of the young people who went to serve in the global war on terror. So I've got quite a few of friends of mine who have served and texting them and thinking about them today. So no work in the office today.
Okay.
And coincidentally, no pants.
Okay.
It took a long time to get to that point.
I was going to say,
Yeah.
whatever, moving right along. Donald Trump, Matthew, gave an interview last night to Laura Ingraham that people within MAGA, they're not happy. And this is one such soundbite where the president talked about the economy. Listen.
The economy was listed as a top concern. I know you know this for voters in New Jersey, New York, Virginia. I know you've been all over the affordability issue today and for the last several months. Eggs, gas, a dinner cost for Thanksgiving way down. But other things, as you noted, have gone up. Beef, coffee,
but they're gonna come
auto
down very
repairs.
shortly.
Is this a voter perception issue of the economy, or is there more that needs to be done by Republicans on Capitol Hill or done in terms of policy?
More than anything else, it's a con job by the Democrats. They're saying, they just have to say, they put out something, say today costs are up. They feed it to the anchors of ABC, CBS, and NBC, and a lot of other, and CNN, and et cetera. And it's like a standard. I'll never forget they had used a word like manufactured. Do you remember the word manufactured? It's a manufactured economy. Nobody uses that word. Every anchor broke through manufactured. They do exactly what they say. It's such a rigged system. So are you ready? Costs are way down.
So, Matthew, that is Donald Trump talking about how costs are way down. I went through some of the numbers earlier, and people are just not feeling that costs are down. And the president is now being accused of trying to gaslight the American people. That's one of several instances where President Trump has apparently raised the ire of MAGA. So let's talk a little bit about that specific answer. Groceries, by and large, are up. I mean, there's no other way to say it. They may go down at some point. The president is working on it. But what are your thoughts on all of that?
You know, when President Trump took office in January of this year, the price of eggs were about $6.50 per dozen. They have gone down. They're down at about $1.93 right now, the average cost. And so in reality, when people go to the grocery store, costs are down. There is, I would say, reality and perception, and people's perception is their reality. So if they still feel like the costs are up, then that is how that's where the frustration is going to manifest. And so being able to speak to that, part of this, Donald Trump is absolutely right. If the media continues to say prices are up, then people will think prices are up. I do think this White House has done an excellent job on messaging, and this may be an issue that they need to focus on. In Virginia, just last week, we had an entire election focused solely on the economy and in particular the government shutdown. And so the perception of voters, especially in Northern Virginia, was that the government wasn't working with the people in charge. So is it a little different? Is perception different than reality? Yes. Is that something that people who want to win elections have to contend with? Also, yes.
I think part of the problem here is that there's different ways to look at the economy, right? You look at inflation, then you look at cornflation, then you look at, I guess, what they call food at home, and that is what is in your grocery basket overall, and that number is up. So the food in your basket, it is up from January. But again, I think it's fair to say that there's work to be done. I think that is part of where the president does need to land, is that we're working on it. We're trying to get interest rates lower. We're trying to look at, different ways that we can actually lower prices when it comes to the groceries in your basket at the store. So I think that for the president, I think people just want to hear that we're working on it. I don't think that people, and I do agree with you, the president is right in some sense that the media, they're always looking at something to criticize the president over. But I think that when people's everyday experiences is that the price of food is still too high, trying to say that, well, this is just a manufactured crisis. I don't think that, I mean, clearly from what MAGA is telling us and what I'm hearing on the super text line is that people are not necessarily buying that, prices are going down the way that the president describes it. And I think part of the problem with President Trump is that on day one, he said, when he was campaigning, he said, day one, prices are going to go down. And, some things have gone down, other things have not. And so I think part of what what people want to hear is not your experience is not reality. I think people simply want to hear, I'm working on it, and put it in perspective, because when we all remember what Joe Biden was like. We all remember what that 4 years was like. I don't expect the president to be perfect. I said this whole thing a while ago in the first hour. I look at my relationship, if you will, with President Trump and with any politician. It's not ever going to be perfect. We're not ever going to agree on everything, but there's going to be some things that we disagree on. And that's just the way that it is. But I think that a lot of people feel like the president may be out of touch.
You make an excellent point there in the middle, Dan, empathizing with the American people. And so one of the things that this administration has done very well is using social media and communications channels to push out a message. And I think it would be, of the many things they could do, something could be having members of the administration and even average Americans do direct-to-camera communication to the American people talking about the issues. Somebody in Iowa who has benefited from the president's policies, a mom in the South who's benefited from the policy, saying, the president is listening, and these are the issues that are important. Obviously, for the last 40 days, we've been contending with a government shutdown, and not a lot has happened in Washington. But the president has a broad reach across all of their social media properties in the administration, and using those properties to talk about these issues and to say I'm listening is very important. I think about President Bill Clinton sometimes, and one of the things that he said was, I feel your pain, and I can still hear him say it, and I think that is something that would benefit this administration to say, I empathize with you, or I sympathize with your plight, trying to make ends meet, and we're working on it. I think that would be very beneficial.
So the government shut down. It's kind of what I was calling it yesterday, but I was sick in my defense, Matthew. The government shut down. Of course, the Senate has now passed that bill on its way over to the House of Representatives. A lot of people saying that this was obviously a big loss for Chuck Schumer. The rumors of AOC spending an hour on the phone with Chuck Schumer, basically telling him that he was weak and she was going to take his job. Do you think that Chuck Schumer would actually spend an hour on the phone being berated by AOC?
I certainly think that this is important enough within the Democratic primary atmosphere that he would listen to her and hear her out. Many people, even politicians, like access to other politicians. And so, many people will go to the Capitol, they'll talk to their senator or their congressman, and they'll say, oh, I got a meeting. And so this is an I got a meeting moment that could diffuse some of the frustration that might prevent AOC from primarying Chuck Schumer in the next Senate election in New York. I think it is incredibly important for those kinds of conversations to happen. But it seems to me, at least on the Democrat side, that a wing of the Democratic Party believes that Orange Man is bad, and giving him any win is capitulation to the right and deserves to be primaried. And I think that is a dangerous road into 2026.
Let me ask you this, because I do find the whole thing interesting. I cannot find one Democrat that is actually saying, and you watch this stuff a lot closer than I do, but have you seen any Democrats out there that have tried to say that there is any kind of a victory for their party with this? I mean, yesterday, everywhere from Adam Schiff to, you name the Democrat, they were crying that basically they lost in this battle over the government shutdown.
Yeah, it's so fascinating to me. Living in Virginia, we, again, contended with elections last week, And it seemed to me as a Virginia voter that Democrats were holding out through Election Day. I even joked that we'd reopen the government next Wednesday because then, Democrats got the outcomes they wanted in New York, New Jersey, and Virginia, and then they could proceed. This is it's an odd place to be because we as voters, Republican, Democrat, Independent, and people who aren't tuned in, expect the government to work. We expect congressmen and senators to go to work and do their jobs. And so I think this segment of the Democratic Party is out of step with most Americans. Republicans were saddled with some of the blame, but it was shifting toward the end of the shutdown last week. And I'm just not sure what the point is of arguing like Gavin Newsom or AOC or anybody else that this was a failure of the Democrats, but it's all partisan games for them, again, heading into the midterm elections.
Do you think part of what the Democrats are freaking out about is that they had the Mamdani victory, they had the victory in Virginia, New Jersey, and so forth, and so they really do feel like the wind is in their sails, and so they see this sort of as a step back, like we had all of this great victory or these great victories, and now, as you said, capitulating to Donald Trump. What do you think ultimately is going to happen? I know that we're a year out, but I don't know. Where are you at with the midterm elections? Has your perspective changed at all over the past, couple of weeks?
Well, the Virginia Speaker of the House said they were going to legislate with prudence and not go to the far left. I think there'll be instances in Virginia and as voters start to tune in for the midterms where Democrats who won last week and who may win early next year are going to go far left, and most Americans do not agree with that, and there will be a reaction or a revolt among voters. It does remain to be seen. A couple of these redistricting issues where it's a mathematical game. Will Republicans start ahead of 218, or will that number go below 218, the majority in the House? And we don't know what that looks like, and we won't know probably until March or April of next year. But I do think we'll start with a pretty clean slate at the beginning of the year as voters start to tune in with what's going on in Washington and specifically with their member of Congress. Yeah,
I think all of this is fascinating, of course, and what ultimately is going to happen. I know there's a lot of people that are worried about the midterm elections. The CR is now over to the House of Representatives. And Hakeem Jeffries is out there saying that he is going to fight this. And I guess my question is, can they make this attempt to pass the continuing resolution on the House of Representatives side? Is that going to be something that they can procedurally delay?
That's a great question, Dan. I'm not exactly sure. I mean, Republicans have a numerical majority. Yeah. I think it'll go just back to the full House floor. You've seen some intra-party squabbling from Republicans. I just don't know what the benefit is at this time. As people travel for Thanksgiving, I was in Nashville over the weekend, and getting back to DCA was a chore. And part of that was the air traffic controller situation. And I think more and more Americans are going to see where the federal government isn't working in direct impact to their lives, and they're going to be equally outraged about it if this kind of activity continues.
Well, one of the things, and I some of this stuff I haven't yet covered today, one of the things, real quickly, Matthew Hurtt joining us, is President Trump said yesterday, I'm going to paraphrase, but the president said that he's got to view the presidency as a worldwide situation, not locally. In other words, there are people within the MAGA movement that are saying, well, the president is too worried about cozying up to, Xi Jinping versus, worrying about, say, for example, the economy here in America. I could quibble with what the president said. I totally get what the president is saying. I think that people are sort of misconstruing what he said, but I'm just going to throw it to you. Do you think the president perhaps has been more worried about ending wars and all that as opposed to being focused at home?
This is another issue where it's a perception thing.
Yeah.
The president can do both. And if he does international activity, if he's talking with world leaders, as well as addressing concerns on domestic policies and talking about those, the American people will understand that he's doing both. If more of his social media comments and interview comments and those kinds of things focus on domestic issues, the American people will think he's focused more on domestic issues. So it is 100% a perception issue, and I think President Trump can balance both domestic and international obligations.
And with that, we are going to say have a great rest of week. Matthew Hurtt, how can people find you on X?
I'm on X at Matthew Hurtt, MatthewHurtt.